We'll see also for later, because then maybe it'll be interesting. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for coming to Unlocking Open WASH Data. And it's really wonderful to have you here on Thursday at 9 a.m. You know, we actually have a pretty good turnout. So thank you very much for, staying in there with all of us. And I think I've even seen some faces that I saw last night at unearthly hours. So thank you very much. I think it'll be great. My name is Nick Dickinson from, I'm the lead of WASHWeb. And I'm here with my other colleagues, including Liz Tilley from ETH Zurich, and we're hosting this session. But I wanted to start off with something a little bit festive. Oh. Yeah, it's someone's birthday today. So Muti Nilema, please, from BASEflow Malawi, please come on stage. Come on stage. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Muti.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to you.
Enough, that was horrible.
I don't know how many of you know, but Muti is not only an amazing WASH professional and data advocate, but he is also a sci-fi author.
Oh boy.
Yeah, you should.
When you give me time to do it.
So, this is a very appropriately themed card, although I wish I had a Star Trek one, but it's Star Wars, sorry.
Okay, so, I'll take it.
Yeah, here you go.
Thank you.
And yeah, Muriel and I fought over what cake you should get, but there's a little cake in there. I should have unpacked it, but it's a little bit difficult. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, say it.
I have nothing to say. You surprised me. You can't tell I'm blushing right now. But no, thank you very much. I wasn't expecting this, and thank you for the horrible singing. And you've embarrassed me completely. And I hope you have a wonderful session. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. No, well, so you can see what kind of session this is going to be. So anyway, unlocking open WASH data. I mean, really, we're trying to do something new and innovative and try to bring together different communities working on water, sanitation, hygiene, but also working on data or coding or other issues. So I think, oh yeah, I can control the slides. Beautiful. So today's session, really, I mean, it's about looking at this from different perspectives. So we really want to have different communities involved, but also, public, private, civil society, and we want to explore different challenges from those different perspectives. So we have 7 guests here, and I won't bother introducing everyone because everybody is going to come up from their perspective and present a challenge around the use of data or open WASH data. And then on the basis of those challenges, then we'll have discussions. So this is also a session to kind of link with one another and be able to create a community around this. And yeah, a starting point for collective solutions. So the agenda, more or less, is what I mentioned. My colleague Mira Lowen will do an introduction on Liz Tilley will do an introduction on open WASH data from ETH Zurich, and then we also have Mira Lowen who will present WASHWeb, which is this community and group that we're trying to build up. And then we'll have our pitches, we'll have group discussion, and then a plenary reflection. So, and then hopefully we'll be able to stay in touch with each other afterwards. So without any further ado, Liz, go for it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Do I have slides? Oh, sorry. There we go, perfect. So as Nick said, my name is Liz Tilley. I'm a professor at a university in Zurich. It's called ETH. And Open WASH Data is actually one of the programs that we're running. It's an initiative that is funded by the university in recognition of the fact that within research and within our partnerships, we don't actually have access to open data. It's very difficult to process and make it available. And so I'm going to just briefly introduce 2 of the initiatives that we're working on within this Open WASH Data project. The first one is really about building an open WASH data community. So really connecting people and being able to not only empower people with the skills and tools to be able to make their data open, but also to really learn and develop the capacity among our members. So if you are sitting at a table, you can see maybe your pamphlet. There's an overview of the workflow that we try to share and work with our partners. If you've ever heard the term FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, reproducible, the FAIR concept is something that we try to disseminate and ultimately achieve for everyone in the sector. And one of the ways that we do this is through the Open WASH Data Academy. So this is a 10-week online free program where we basically are trying to teach and mentor people from academia, from policy, from government. We know that all of our partners, myself included, have tons and tons and tons of data, whether it's sitting on our laptops or on hard drives under our beds or on PDF reports. There's absolutely so much data sitting out there that doesn't adhere to FAIR principles, that isn't findable, or that isn't machine readable. So through this course, which we offered last year and which we'll be offering again, the idea is to try and help people take those hard copies, take those Excel files, and really learn how to make them accessible and available for other partners in the sector to reduce waste, to reduce replication, and to make sure that people get recognition for the data that they have spent so long trying to collect. So if you're interested in this, we'll be offering it again in October this year. And the second part of our community building initiative is what we call the Data Stewardship Network. Colin Valder is a data steward who works with my group. So his job is to curate and manage and help disseminate data. We're also working with Soil, with Muti, with Sasha Kramer from Soil. Sorry, Muti is BASEflow, Sasha is Soil, and then the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So all of these partners will have data stewards installed in their institutions that will help them to curate and disseminate their data within their institutions. So that's a short overview. There's more information on your tables, and I'm very much looking forward to receiving and hopefully working with you on some of your data. Thanks.
Academic, so she has her references as well. You missed them. All right, my name is Mara Lowen. I'll introduce WASHWeb briefly. So thanks, Nick, for the introduction earlier. WASHWeb is a dynamic bottom-up initiative. We're trying to create a community that really sits at the intersection between WASH and data, to promote open WASH data, to make data more accessible within our sector. How have we done that so far? So we've actually hosted 2 webinars, which were very successful with over 500 participants. The first one was on innovations in WASH data. So we invited a speaker who's working on WASH and AI, for example. We had Acquia join our webinar, and a bunch of other innovators in the space to talk about what they're doing and how they're advancing open WASH data. The second webinar was on partnerships for WASH data. So we invited people who are working more on the social aspects of data and how they're working together to promote data sharing, as well as making data representative to different communities. So our vision is that, you've probably heard me say a couple of these words already, but our vision is that WASH data is discoverable, useful, and representative. So what do those things mean? Discoverable means that data is easily found when you're looking for a certain data source. Useful means that the information is reliable, up to date, and traceable. And then finally, representative means that the information that you do find represents the communities that they're about. So that's our WASHWeb vision in a nutshell. Who's the team? So you've already met Nick Dickinson. He's the WASHWeb lead and the brains behind WASHWeb. And my name is Meryl Lowen, and I'm the WASHWeb coordinator. We're also really happy to build partnerships and really to build out this community. So if you're interested in our vision or if you align with the work we do, please feel free to reach out. And we'd be really happy to continue the conversation. And to do so, you can stay in touch by scanning the QR code above, and that will take you to WASHWeb's link tree, where you can go to our socials. So we have our YouTube channel, which has the recordings of both webinars, our LinkedIn, and a link to this session, which you're already in. So congrats, you did the first thing. I'll keep that up for a little bit longer. Right. Okay, then without further ado, we're gonna go into the pitch portion of the session, which is gonna be really nice and really interactive, so I hope you enjoy. Yeah, let's get started.
So thank you very much, Meryl and Liz. So at this stage, I just wanted to share a few points about how these pitches will be working. We'll have the seven pitches. There are hopefully some cards and markers on the tables. If there are no markers, I can also bring them, or you can use a pen. And the idea is that if you have any questions that are stimulated by the pitches, or any thoughts, some experience that you may want to share in the discussion, you can already jot it down in advance, and it's possible that you may have a thought or a question for more than one pitch. But afterwards, we'll each be in one group. So you'll have a moment where you can kind of distribute those, but then we'll go into the groups. So it's an opportunity for peer exchange and discussion, and then we'll have our plenary Q&A, as I mentioned before. So I think we'll just get started. And let's see.
Hi everyone, I'm Rick Johnston. I'm with the World Health Organization, and I'm making a pitch around defining impact for global indicators and aligning to accelerate progress. So this is primarily with my hat on as a global person who wants to collect data that are comparable from different countries so that you can make comparisons between and within countries and over time. And this applies to the JMP program, but also to the GLAAS program. It also applies to any scale that's larger than national, really. You could think about regional associations, regulatory associations, international NGOs, anyone who wants to compare amongst multiple countries. What you need to have is common indicators. So how do you get to common indicators while respecting that contexts are different and everyone has their own particular needs and monitoring systems? How to move then from local, generating data that are tailored to local contexts and useful in local contexts, up to a scale where they can also be used for these international comparisons. It's a challenge. We have examples of this having been done, though. We have the transition from MDGs to the SDGs, where we came up with a set of common indicators, and it's important that safely managed sanitation, for instance, means the same thing whether we're in Malaysia or Malawi or Moldova or Indonesia, which has its own national definition of safely managed sanitation, which is different from the global one. So there are challenges there, but also, you need to respect local priorities. Currently, so the JMP has recently done a review of indicators of gender in WASH, and we've proposed a set of harmonized core indicators that we hope people uptake. And along with GLAAS, we're currently making a review of climate resilient WASH indicators, because we all want to be measuring climate resilience in WASH, but we don't have common definitions, frameworks, or indicators. So likewise, GLAAS is conducting a review of indicators of strengths of WASH systems. One thing we want to do is to cast the net wide and see what people are using. So if you're using frameworks or indicators about climate resilient WASH or the strength of WASH systems, you can contribute those to this website or write to that email address. We also need to be thinking what's going to follow the SDGs, because they may be the same set of indicators, they may be different ones. But how do we get to a place where we can speak with one voice so that whether you're at the local level or the global level, the indicators mean the same thing and they're useful to practitioners at those different scales? Plenty of challenges there. We have the means of implementation indicators, 6A and 6B, not terribly useful. We'd like to replace them with more meaningful indicators, but that same challenge. How do we build consensus around a set of global indicators? So come to the table that I'll be sitting at eventually, and we can work on these challenges. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, birthday boy. My name is Muti Shema. I am from Malawi. I'm the team leader and founder of an organization called BASEflow. And also, as mentioned by Nick, I'm a data advocate, but an accidental one. I stumbled into it, and I haven't found a way of stumbling my way out of it. And that is why I'm standing here today to present my this particular slide on creating a sector wiki for water asset inventory. About 6 years ago, I stood on a stage like this one at World Water Week, and I did a presentation called Boots on the Ground. We're looking at how we're going to update my country's water asset inventory. And I'm pleased to say we did it. We built a database called MWAMIS, which is short for Malawi Water Asset Management Information System, which has more than 100,000 water points in it, and also more than 200,000 sanitation points, and also other assets like groundwater monitoring, gauge stations. A lot of assets are in that particular system. And it's been through a combination of using the platform mWater, but also building the capacity of local as well as national governments to get to where we are. It's taken 6 years to get to where we are, but we're here. Now, the obvious question my government obviously asks is, how do we update it? Because it's just a point in time. It captures data that's a point in time. How do we update this platform? And what I've suggested to my government is that we need to engage sector stakeholders like NGOs that are always in the field collecting data, that we let them into the system so that they can be updating it as part of their work. But unfortunately, the platform with all this data is locked. Nobody has access to it. Well, I do because I'm a super user, but the rest of the sector does not. Now, there are many reasons for this, but there are two major reasons that I've noticed from my government. The first one is that my government operates in a low resource environment. They don't have enough money to do the stuff that they need to do, let alone collecting or analyzing data. So as a result, the data is viewed as a financial good first than anything else. So they want to monetize it. The second problem I've noticed is that they've had very bad experiences with imposed data ideals, where organizations or partners from the global north tell the government to do one thing that they themselves don't do. So they choose to cling to it as a result. So right now, as I stand with you, I have 6 months left to the end of the program to try to open up my government. So the challenge, I would hopefully, if you want to come to my table, I have a few ideas, but I want to hear from you. So those of you who are interested, how do I get a government that is skeptical and low resource to open up the data so that other people can come in and actually start updating the platform the way people update Wikipedia? That's my challenge. Thank you very much, and hopefully you come to my table.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Mercer from the WASH Research and Development Centre, which is based at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, South Africa. And my challenge is how do you overcome capacity constraints within an academic environment in terms of getting access and sharing data that is collected over the years? So one of our biggest challenges is that we have a lot of legacy data. So our research center has been going for 50 years. We were previously known as the Pollution Research Group, but we rebranded in 2020 as the WASH R&D Center. So we have data from 50 years back. And this obviously comes in different formats. Some of it is just sitting in a document. There are often no electronic records of that data. There's different formats. Some of them are still stored on floppies or stiffies. So yeah, how do we actually access that and make that accessible and put it into a format that can be shared? A second one is the high turnover. So we have a lot of researchers that will spend a few years with us and then leave. We have interns that come and stay with us. We have postgraduate students. So we have people in and out quite regularly over the years. And in some cases, there's data that will leave with them, that it isn't actually handed over to us. Sometimes we have students that start a project but don't finish, so you have incomplete data sets. So that's another issue that we have to deal with. It's also, we have a big issue in terms of capacity that because we are a research center that basically works on contract, so we have to get in our own funding, we are often doing too much with too little people. So everybody's working on more than one project, and we also, our research very much is focused on research with an impact. So we're often too busy doing the work to actually publish all of the data that we have access to or have generated. We also generally, as researchers, don't have the skills in terms of managing the data correctly, storing them correctly, and actually making sure everybody uses the same platform for putting their data once they have generated it. And lastly, there's also the issue around the ownership of the data. Because we work with different funders, they all have different rules and regulations and policies around who actually owns the data, the intellectual property, etc. So, if you come to my table, our challenge is looking at how do we overcome all of these challenges, basically, but in particular, the issue around capacity within a research or an academic environment in making this data accessible to everyone. Thanks.
A very good morning. Because my freedom to be here is a product of international solidarity and resistance, I have a moral obligation to firstly center the Palestinian people, the people whose right to access to water is prohibited and controlled by a settler colonialist government. The people's prohibited his right to even harvest rainwater is prohibited. Our elders and forefathers taught us that our freedom as South Africans is incomplete without the liberation of the Palestinian people. So I think it's gratitude to them first of all. So let's go back to the program because I've made you a little uncomfortable initially, but that was my intention. My name is Sandy Limbata. I'm from South Africa. I'm the National Chief Data Officer. I'm responsible for building the National Strategic Hub, which centers data as critical infrastructure and an asset for making decisions on planning, on resource allocation, and monitoring. As a department, we are responsible for 257 municipalities. 205 of those are local municipalities, 44 are districts, 8 of those are metros, 144 of those are water services authority that are struggling to deliver services. Our objective with data is to provide a single source of truth to make decisions on water resources, on infrastructure, and so forth. But very often, and that's my invitation to you, and you see on the right, that's a 10-slide situation or 5 slides, because we all have 1 slide, so I had to cramp everything in there. So, because I work for government and we are constantly grappling with the question of whose data is it anyway, could we in government talk about data ownership or is it data custodianship? I've lost a bit of hair on the side to looking for data. We've got trillions of data sets everywhere. So that's part is because of asking for data. But what I would like to discuss in my table, and most of you will be there, but some should go to my colleagues, of course, because we don't want to have lonely tables. Who owns the data in the public sector? And I want to hear from you and how you're dealing with it and in your own space. Data ownership breeds data egos. Data egos means people hog their data and they can't share it. And data is only a resource when it's shared and it influences how decisions are made. But I also want to ask the question of availability versus accessibility. Is open data that's available publicly also accessible? What about local government in low resource conditions that can't really do anything with the data, who are not as technical as we are? The importance of data registry and metadata, so showing that the data has its own history. So we build solid visualizations that you see. We really build some cool things with the data that we do, but constantly we ask ourselves the so what question until we get to the decisions. But we also understand that we cannot make data make sense unless we build a robust public value data ecosystem. So through that, we try to build these break these data silos and data egos. But the strategic intent of that is really to make sure that shared data is has public value, is also shared public value. We want to create a bit of transparency, and governments don't often say this. We want to create co-governance, and governments don't really want to co-govern. We want to create knowledge co-production, and governments often don't want to do that. So in my table, we're going to discuss the data ownership versus data custodians. We're going to discuss who owns the data in the public sector and how do we expand the use of data and make sure that the data reaches where it needs to reach and people can make the decisions they need to make. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, I want to go to all the other tables, and I also have to host a table. Good morning. I am Kimberly Lemmy. I am with DigDeep, a human rights organization that is working to close the WASH access gap in the United States. Over 2 million Americans live without water access, which is sometimes hard to believe, especially as we've spent this week together talking about the huge global 4 billion number that's floating around right now. And in a place like the US, we also struggle with access. So we're here to learn from you, and that's what my table's about. But let me tell you and set the stage a little bit about what the scenario around data and WASH is in the US. It's super fragmented. At least 6 federal agencies sit with different sets of data, touch water, touch wastewater, and they don't talk to one another. This is common in many places, but we also have state level, we also have local level, and how do you come up with something that speaks to the picture nationally? We don't actually really know what the size of the crisis is because the data is fragmented, but it's also lacking, and we don't even know what the gaps are. So we're working collectively with partners across the space to pull together what data exists, where are the gaps, how do we fill those gaps? It's difficult to use, it's difficult to access. We, across the US, have lots of sovereign nations within our own boundaries, and those governments should own their own data, and it shouldn't be extracted from them and then used in federal government agencies only, but how do we share it collectively? How do we use it together? How do we make sure that it's open and accessible? We also need to make sure that the communities have access to the data. And if the communities don't have access to the data, it's not informing their decision making, it's not informing how they're closing their own gap and how they're working collectively to do that. And like I said, there's really no clear picture of the problem. So at my table, I would love to hear from the brilliance in this room of what has worked to pull together and coordinate data in fragmented and complex scenarios, because I know that we aren't unique in that, but I would love to learn from those of you in this room and hear from you at the table about that. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stef Smits. I'm with IRC, a knowledge organization based in the Netherlands, and we, amongst others, support different countries in the finances of water and sanitation. So my pitch will be around how can we increase the trust in data, in open data, for making investment decisions, whereby we start from the recognition that data on WASH is often sensitive. Data on the financing, on the financial flows behind WASH is even more sensitive because there's often often conflicting data sources, data flows around the different flows of finance in the water sector. For example, one of the countries where we have been supporting the development of a national WASH sector finance strategy is Honduras, where we combined different data sources, some open data. I think, for example, the OECD creditor reporting system, which contains all the data on ODA flows on WASH. some data sources that are only available and accessible upon request, often more the public finance. There are good databases, but you can only access them on request. And then there's lots of estimated data, like for example on household financial flows. Trying then to put these together in a kind of a common framework using the WASH accounts developed by WHO. If you then put all the data together, then you can very quickly see this does not make any sense. If you add it all up, some data sources or some financial flows appear much bigger or smaller than what would be logical. Then when working with these data subsequently in developing a sector finance strategy, you very quickly find the tension between, oh, we need to get better data, perfect data, do more data collection, and having data that is good enough, credible enough to make investment decisions. But that requires a step in trusting each other's data or accepting that your own data is incomplete, uncertain, but with the big question, is it good enough to make these investment decisions? So if you want to talk around financing WASH and the data on that, please come to my table. Thank you.
Trying to figure out how to get up there. I sat at the wrong table. Good morning, everyone. See, in Haiti where I work, when I say good morning, everyone has to say good morning. Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's the last day. I needed that. My name is Sasha Kramer, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Soil, which is a container-based sanitation service provider in Haiti. We've been working on developing container-based sanitation since 2006, and our main work is providing household sanitation in informal settlements. And one of the big changes that we've had over the last few years is that we are moving from activity-based financing to results-based financing for our work. So as an organization that was founded by scientists who love evidence and we love data, I didn't have my slide, thank you. Gosh, probably none of that made sense. Anyways, we have always loved to have our work led by evidence, so we've always collected data from our customers. And we've always worked with donors who have different types of data that they want to get from us. And actually, this photo here is the Ministry of Public Health visiting one of our clients in Haiti, and this was work that was supported by the Centers for Disease Control. I see my partners here today. And this is the type of external verification that we used to have. So basically, we would submit our data to donors from our databases, and then occasionally they would like to visit. And we could say to clients, is there anyone who would be open to having a visit? And that already felt a little bit like, ooh, we're inviting people into their house to see their toilet, but at least they had the option. But as we've shifted to results-based financing, we need to have independent verifiers checking to make sure that people are really getting the services we say they are. So this means that we have someone else who's not us calling a large subset of our clients and asking really personal questions like, do you have a toilet? What kind of toilet did you have before? Did you not have one? Did you pay for the toilet? A long list of questions that what I'd like to do here and what I'd like to do at the table is to take it from this very high level down to the level of the individual and have us imagine, how would you feel if you were being called by someone and asked these very personal questions? And I think one more layer of complexity that I'd like to mention around it is that in the sector, as market-based approaches have become more common, I think we have this tension for a long time in the development sector. We talked about beneficiaries, people who were receiving free services. And there was this idea, if you're receiving a free service, then part of the exchange is you're willing to share information. But we run a revenue-generating nonprofit, which means people pay for these services. They're clients. And so that really blurs the line of what right do we have to go and ask them about a service that they've paid for. So I think that what I'm hoping to discuss at the table are, as we move forward with results-based financing, are there less invasive ways to independently verify the results we have? Can we do it with mobile money transfers so we don't need to call people? Are there other ideas around that? So I'm seeking your support as we move into phase 2 of the results-based financing. And I'm also going to ask all of us at the table to really put ourselves in the place of the client and use our empathy to think about what are the best solutions to this. Thank you. Oh, and I've got conference swag for anyone who comes to my table, so. Sorry, guys. That was totally unfair and unscripted.
Great. Okay, that was exciting. I want to go to all the tables, and I'm sure everybody feels similarly. Just some ground rules. All ideas are welcome. I mean, these are brainstorm sessions, so I think we're just going to work on the basis of getting everybody's feedback. So what we'll do is each of the challenge owners will take a table here, and then you'll have an opportunity to kind of walk around, put your cards on the tables if you wrote anything on a card, or otherwise just join a table that you're interested in. And don't worry, we have space, but if one table is full and then there are a lot of people, standing around and they haven't found a table, then we'll start combining tables. So it will work out. We will have some flip charts, and we'll also ask each table to have a chart writer who helps out and writes down some of the ideas as we go. So I think I'll ask my honored pitch owners to distribute themselves through the room so we can continue. And I want to acknowledge also the people online. Thank you very much for joining our session. And we will also have some discussions online and some breakout rooms. So Colin, did you want to say anything about that? Sorry, Colin, yeah, Walter will be facilitating the online discussion. Thank you. We're gonna wrap up the group discussions, and then we're gonna have a little a cappella session up here. Can I ask the challenge owners to slowly migrate up here? Just leave the flip chart, I think. But unless they're in the way of the stage, then we want to move them a little bit, if that's all right. All right. So let's go ahead and all just stand up. I think we'll stand up here if that's all right. Let me see. Sasha, we need you. Kim. All right. Calling Kim. Thank you, Sue. There is a roaming mic. There's a roaming mic. Oh, you want to stand by your boards? Yeah, but with the recording. I think, Sue, you're gonna have to wing it I'm sure you can do it. And we can also ask someone from your group, because there is a roaming mic.
Right.
So if there's anything that we're missing after this, I think let's see if there are any questions or compliments from the group. So I'm just gonna, you can come a little bit further down, Steph, because you won't fall off yet. Yeah. All right. So, and are the cameras okay? They can see everybody? All right, great. Thank you also, all the folks online, for staying online. So, yeah. I think I'm just going to go down the line, since we're all lined up perfectly right here. And I want to ask you really, in just a couple minutes, what are the reflections that came out of your table? Are there any, what did you discuss? And is there some particular insight you want to share?
Yeah, thanks. And first of all, thanks also to the participants in our group. So on the challenge that I presented, I think, first of all, not sure whether in particular order but we started recognizing that indeed financial data is often limitedly available, that for many of the sources of finance, there are no databases or standardized data formats, let alone open ones. So there's limited data. But where it is important that when you start analyzing that is done in a standardized way of accounting, of reporting data. And I think the WASH accounts, making a little pitch here for Rick and his team, is a good way of doing that, at least at sector level. Of course, that's different when you do it at project level or at utility level. So it depends also a little bit at what level, but a standardized approach for accounting for costs, for unit costs, for benchmarking is key. We also said the level of detail you need in that also differs. Sometimes orders of magnitude are good enough. For example, for a total financial balance of the sector, orders of magnitude are fine. If it's at a project level or at utility level, you need the accuracy. And we don't want tariffs that are just too low or just too high for the utility to break even. And I think finally, and I really acknowledge the contribution from DigDeep Joy, if we want to move forward on this, we need that financial literacy so that the WASH sector can better understand and interpret financial data, and that those databases that are typically, particularly on public finance, that are typically hosted by a Ministry of Local Government, a Ministry of Finance, understand the needs that we as a WASH sector have, so that that data gets tagged or disaggregated in a way that's useful. And that requires that financial literacy dialogue between WASH sector professionals and those dealing with financial databases.
Great. Wow. I wish I was at that table. No, we had a great table. I'm happy with our table. It really didn't feel like Thursday morning after 4 days of conference. It felt like everyone was fresh and full of energy, so that was fun. And remember, we were the ones looking at how to develop global indicators that are relevant and useful for different types of actors. One principle, we identified a number of principles. One was about having a transparent and open and consultative process, but one that is flexible and open to critical review from people who feed into that process. And it's critical that review process is wide-ranging and captures diversity among users, because if we think about designing indicators, we have to think about what will these be used for, and that leads us into who is going to be using them. And there's a diversity of users. Going from the global level, we have a certain set of users, but our principle is that global data should be based on national data, which is usually based on subnational or local scale data. So there are different users at all those levels. And it's tricky to get thoughtful reflections from all those diverse users during an indicator development process. We had some ideas about that, how that can be done. Certainly the JMP and GLAAS teams are small, so we need to leverage our networks, which is all of you people and your networks, and particularly thinking about data and data flows, there are communities of practice, like openwashdata, like the MWater users, like the ACVO users. We need to maybe specifically target those data user communities and do some qualitative research about what works and what doesn't work with the current indicator set to better design new indicator sets. And then once candidate indicators are identified, it was considered that it's really important to do some ground truthing and piloting in real-world contexts at those different scales. A final challenge that we noted is that sometimes we need to develop indicators and frameworks where the scientific evidence base is not very complete yet, and certainly climate resilience WASH is one of those areas. So doesn't mean you can't forge ahead and make recommendations based on existing practice and understanding, but also to be humble and realize that we may be wrong in some things or maybe missing some information, and that there is a risk of perverse incentives. So just being very careful about what recommendations are made and keeping an eye on and tracking those things and being willing to adjust them over time if it turns out that maybe some of those initial ideas were not useful in the end. Table, anything that we wanted to add to this summary?
Did you have 3 hours?
Well, we've been thinking about this for a while. And Martin took all these beautiful notes. Yes, go read the details version is there.
We're all out.
Okay. My group, we're looking at how we can make the ministry in my country comfortable with opening up the WASH database called MWAMIS, which is the Malawi Water Asset Management Information System. And I think there's a kind of golden thread through some of the points that we touched on, but I think the starting point was collaborative efforts, sort of collective action, bringing certain stakeholders together. And I think we said we should stand on the shoulders of giants. And in this case, the giants being the UNICEFs, the World Banks, who have also a vested interest in data that will inform investment decisions, that they be the face of it. Because I think one of the things I said in the group is that as much as I've done this work with the government, but the thing is I'm a local organization, I might not be as strong a voice, but having giants, bigger than myself, who can actually be in certain spaces, have certain conversations around advocating or selling the benefits of sharing data, as well as the costs of not sharing data, so that there's that sort of well-rounded understanding of why it's important to update data for investment decisions, especially at national level. And also another point which came up, which I really liked this idea, I'd never thought of this particular idea, was coming up with a kind of options, providing options to the government of ways that you can update the database. For example, there was a suggestion of working through other ministries, even though there are politics there, particularly when you look at health, because you have health workers at the local level that actually collect WASH data. Could we use those networks, as well as education? So providing options like that. And of course, I said this in the table, the extreme end of that would be opening it up to everybody. But that would be one of the options. So trying to show them these are some of the options for updating the database, the benefits and costs of each one, and then having a conversation around what seems workable within their particular context. On the issue of monetization, I think we said that is something that's going to be a pain point for the government, so we cannot avoid it. So really trying to understand what data is available, what can be monetized, what cannot be monetized, so that at least we meet them halfway. Especially in a low-resource environment like Malawi, the issue of monetization will always be a sticking point, so we probably have to operate in that reality and see, is there a way we can meet in the middle? So, yeah. So those are some of the ideas. My table, did I summarize beautifully? Excellent. Yeah. Thank you.
Muti, the sci-fi author, is always a tough act to follow.
Well, I had big acts to follow.
So we had a great conversation at our table, and the pitch was really, how do we coordinate in a place like the US that is so fragmented with data. And we started talking about tools, and we actually have all the tools. We have lots of tools. We have lots of different data sets. They just don't talk to one another. They don't interact. They don't tell the same story. The one tool we have that is done consistently across the entirety of the country is the census. That is done household by household by household, but it's only done every 10 years. So it's only as good as every 10 years. There are surveys that go periodically in between that 10 years and gets household data, but it's a much smaller segment, it's a much smaller sampling size. And on top of that, since 1990, the questions around water and sanitation access have slowly been stripped out. So there's an effort underway to get some more meaningful WASH-related data, access-related data back in, and then we have to start building from there. So we talked about tools. We had a really interesting kind of sidebar conversation about commercial data. We know places like Amazon, Walmart, Target, all the big box stores have oodles and oodles and oodles. They know more about my shopping habits than I do, probably. And so are there ways that we could partner to get, what are the trends in places that are lacking, in places that we know that are lacking access? Is there any way to extract any useful information from that type of data? The last thing that we talked about that I think underlines all of the things that we probably discussed at our tables is trust. The communities in the US that don't have water and sanitation access don't trust any outsiders, especially the government. And so how do you intentionally start to build that trust? And for good reason, they don't trust outsiders, I would say. For centuries and decades have been marginalized and left behind. And so, of course, they don't trust outsiders. And why are you going to come survey me again when no change happened last time you surveyed me? So those are three kind of key areas where I had a lot of really good input from my table. Anything that I left out that you would highlight? Okay, great, thanks.
I tell you, I have never been on a session with such a sparky group of data scientists. I mean, you don't always think of data people as being so sparky, but this is an amazing crew. Well, I'm saying. No, and I also do feel like the other tables somehow paused time and had a lot more time than we did, but we did come away with, I got some great feedback from our table. And I think that at the root of it is this question of respecting the customer. And I do think that there are things within the development sector that we can borrow from corporations. So we did a lot of thinking about, for instance, if Kohler called me up and asked about my toilet, I'd hang up. But if they sent a survey saying, would you like to give some feedback, then it offers customers the choice. So how do we put that power in the hands of the customers for them to have these feedback loops where they can share problems if they have them, and also where maybe we need to be talking to our donors about the fact that there needs to be consent. And just because we're subsidizing a service for someone does not mean that they have to consent to being called. And so maybe just like we do when we do solid research and we have to go through the ethics committee, it's the same thing with implementation. Customers can say, yes, I opt in, or no, please never call me. And then the list that we give to the donor is only those who have consented to be called. Another thing we said is who verifies is important. So right now we have a local firm, which I think does make a big difference. But we talked about, although now I'm kind of going back on it after listening to what Kim just said about trust, because I think this could go either way. But do we want to work with local municipalities and authorities to do some of that verification? Because ultimately, we're providing a public service which will be handed over to them. That trust does need to be built, and should they be the ones that are actually going around and collecting that data, that has the added benefit of making sure they have access to that data. So they're the ones looking at the lists and looking at the GPS points. And then I think I'm very grateful to be in this partnership with openwashdata. I'm so looking forward to working with Colin, because we do recognize that for non-networked services, it's harder to have automated ways to verify data. So if you've got a sewer, or if you've got a piped water, you can actually monitor flows. You know where that water is going. If it's non-networked, what are the tools that we can use to verify without having to speak with the customers? And then finally, we said as implementers and within the CBS Alliance or even service providers, we should get together and harmonize our approach. Talk about what are we comfortable asking our customers, what are we not, and then collectively go back to donors and present a case for what we're comfortable with. Did I miss anything, table? Yet? Oh, I thought that was a yes, you missed something. Okay, we're good. Thank you very much.
Did the bribes work?
No, nobody even took any swag. So there's plenty of swag for everyone.
Okay, hi everyone. So our table was looking at overcoming capacity constraints, particularly within a research environment. And I think it sort of went a little bit further than that. It was just really looking at what are the constraints generally in an academic and research environment around data management. So one of the points that we looked at, well, we first came up with a few more challenges and then started looking at the solutions. So one of the things around looking at sort of old data and saying that, we've got research data going back 50 years, is that data actually even useful? So that's one of the questions to start asking. Is it actually worth going back and trawling through all of that data or not? The other thing is that if data was generated that long ago, how was it generated? I mean, now you have to go through all sorts of ethical clearance and making sure that it's done in an ethical manner, which didn't exist back then. Even particularly within the engineering department, even now, I think we're one of the first groups that's actually looking at ethical clearance for some of our work. So that's one thing to look at. Is it actually useful to take a look at that data? So just in terms of capacity and constraints, I mean, one of the obvious solutions is to hire somebody to actually do the work, which then kind of raises the issue around funding. And that really is one of the core things. I think with funding, most things are possible. So we also then looked at, well, how do you get that funding, or how do you make other ways of making it happen? So particularly if you are designing any kind of project, make sure that you put in an aspect related to data management. Have a section where we set aside some of the budget to look at how do we manage that data. We also make sure we develop a data management plan and have procedures in place. So if you have a professor or a researcher who is retiring, make sure that that data and information is handed over well before that retirement date. We also said look at making partnerships with other people who deal with data management. So look at archivists. How do they deal with older data and store it? Make partnerships with data scientists. Are there a way of having postgraduate researchers from data science coming in and using our data as one of their projects? We also looked at making sure that how do we make our data valuable? So look at who are we trying to target? How do we make that data valuable? Let's develop a research question using existing open-wash data, because I think that's part of the problem is researchers by nature are skeptical and don't trust anyone else's data. So if we start making it sort of the norm to use existing open-wash data. And actually one of the suggestions was to have a special edition in a journal around papers that are developed using accessible and open-wash data. I think that I've covered most of it. And as I say, making sure that there's definitely an exit plan, that we don't have students, interns, people leaving without making sure all of that information is handed over and stored correctly. I don't know, is there anything else I missed on our table? All good? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, colleagues. I think you've covered me. I think we are covered, right? We stop. Sorry. Now, tables, I almost said it's a bunch of untrustworthy because there's a lot of government people, but there's us other non-government people. And we spoke about the why question of why people should share data, but also we spoke about the incentive for sharing data. If you share data and there's negative consequences to that, and we're making an example of India as an example, that if you a school and you report negatively on your results, so you share your data but your results show negative impact or negative outcomes, how do you deal with that? Because there's a bit of punishment in that. And then the other thing we touched on was the idea of setting up sort of data sharing agreements. How do you share data without right formats, right agreements, and sort of defining the context of how people should share data? Because if you just say to people, just share the data without saying this is how you want to share the data, then people don't know how to share the data. They come up in different formats. There's the issue of data literacy as well. So people aren't able to to produce better quality data. Therefore, they don't want to share it because they're skeptical of it. So believe me, in government, people themselves don't trust other departments, don't trust other people asking data. And I think that data, of course, has an opportunity or a capacity as data people. We have an opportunity to create trustworthiness by opening some of the government data. And I think that's where you create sort of co-governance and transparency of government. And I don't know whether government really has an intention by its design to be transparent. And I work for government, so I can say those. So we touched on quite a number of things, but then we came out of solutions, and solutions were quite cool. But there's a lot of other examples that we've made in terms of being very clear why people should report and what's the value addition by sharing the data. Because you can't just come to people and say, share your data. To what end, right? And departments ask that. To what end do I have to share my data? Let's look at more innovative ways of saying, how do we then help you report better, but also show you some of the blind spots. So if you're a health department, there's other things that fall outside of health that impact you. So if other people are sharing data with you, you're seeing a different view. If you share data with other people in the WASH space as an example, so you'll see that, like for instance, we collect the causes of death data. If you see that a lot of people have died of cholera, I'm making an example in a particular area, that is a health issue, but it's also a water and sanitation issue. But it's also a resource allocation issue in terms of water and sanitation. So when you layer the data sets, you start to see more. How do we then build that value so the departments can see that there's value in sharing data? You're adding into a stack of data that gives you a much more clear picture of what's going on. So we thought that it's much better to have data use agreements, create very clear data standards, because if without data standards, there's not going to be data sharing, because you're not really providing a conducive space for data to be shared, because people don't know how to share it. Better sharing of benefits of sharing data, so the positive examples that if you share the data, this is what will happen. There's a quick story of a plumber. It's a plumber dilemma. If you have a plumber who goes and fix the fault is reported, they go fix the fault, and it's in the context of people not sharing the data. From that fault, the plumber goes about 10 kilometers away to fix another fault, but there was a fault 500 meters, but because the GIS system is not talking to the reporting system is not talking to a tracking system of a vehicle with a plumber, you send the plumber elsewhere, and you bring a plumber that's 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers away to come and fix that. So there's a lot of resource inefficiencies if you don't share the data. So these are some of the stories we need to be telling. So I've learned a lot, and thank you, colleagues. Thanks, Rachel, for writing. Do you have additions? I think you have. Okay.
Thank you so much. Well, no, go ahead and say it. Well, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone here, and I want to ask you guys. I mean, how was your group? Did you feel? Yeah. Is your challenge solved? Challenge solved. But I think these discussions and this reflection has really led to some very interesting insights, but more importantly, connections between all of us. And so I want to encourage us to continue the discussions and stay in touch. Did we have a QR code? We have a QR code. So if you would like to stay in touch, please scan that, put your name in and your email. You can even indicate if there's someone in particular that you want to stay in touch with. And in that way, we can build this community and really push some of these issues forward. And, if you want to learn more about OpenWash data, then, Colin over here or Liz can tell you more. And you can also join WASHWeb in order to kind of keep joining these types of events. And we'll partner with different organizations, hopefully with you guys. If anybody wants to, do a webinar series under WASHWeb, that's also an option, as long as it's kind of fitting within the overall vision. So thank you very much for partaking, and we're out of time. So that's the end of it.